Depending on which model you've decided to use to manage your tenant key, there's a number of different actions you could take with the tenant key, and each action is slightly different depending on whether it's a Microsoft managed tenant key or a customer managed tenant key. So for instance, in a revoke action, that would actually be removal of the key entirely. On the Microsoft managed side, you can't revoke the key that Microsoft manages. What you can do is cancel your Azure Information Protection subscription, and after a certain amount of time, that key is automatically revoked. On the customer managed side, since the key is being stored in Azure Key Vault, and Azure Information Protection has to be granted access to get to that key, all you have to do is remove the permissions that were granted to Azure Information Protection, and you have effectively revoked that key. For the rekey action, both scenarios are supported. In order to rekey the Microsoft Managed, you actually have to switch to a bring your own key and then switch back to the Microsoft Managed. The action of switching to a bring your own key effectively archives the Microsoft Managed key, and then it's possible to switch back after the fact. In a customer managed scenario, you simply have to create a new key, add it to Key Vault, and then add it to Azure Information Protection and make that new key the active key. For backup and recovery of keys, for Microsoft managed keys, since Microsoft is managing it, they're responsible for proper backup and recovery if necessary of that key. So there's nothing that you as the customer can do. In a customer managed scenario, you are fully responsible for proper backup and recovery of that key. So it's important to bear that in mind, that management responsibility now lies with you. You may need to export the key for some reason, especially if you're going to a different service but you need to maintain that key for some reason. Microsoft does support the export of the tenant key. However, it's not a point and click affair. It's a multi-day and multi-factor process, since as we discussed, the tenant key is sort of the key to the kingdom. Microsoft is not going to hand over that key lightly. In order to get an export of the key from Microsoft, it's required to open up a support case, verify some information, and then do another verification step before they'll send it to you. On the customer managed side, you already have the key stored somewhere within your infrastructure, so you wouldn't request an export from Azure Information Protection. You'd simply export it from whatever infrastructure is currently housing it. Now, the best security systems in the world need to have some plan for responding to a breach. And in both a Microsoft managed and a customer managed scenario, there are some steps that are needed in order to respond to a breach. And Microsoft documents out what they will do on the Microsoft managed side if they detect a breach, especially if it's of the tenant key. But another scenario could be one of the RSA encryption protocols is determined to be insecure, and so they have to update the encryption protocol that's being used. On the customer managed side, you may determine that your key was compromised or that an endpoint was compromised, and then it's important to have a breach response for each of those scenarios.